my name is Kerry. I'm Kerry Janse van Rensburg. We do not have to have long surnames to work at Project Exodus, but it does seem like a few of us have those. I am one of the directors, and I have spoken into this area previously. What we are finding is there are increasing numbers of companies that are approaching us at the moment and saying, we have an issue in our company. We don't want to lose workers that are really, really good workers. How can we help them to recover well? How can we adopt a restorative approach to recovery in the workplace rather than a punitive approach? So Project Exodus is an addiction recovery organization. We aim to make addiction recovery as available and accessible as possible using current research, evidence-based research, and using just methodologies that are current rather than kind of antiquated methodologies. So having said that, I'm just hoping my slide is going to go. There we go. All right. We need to understand that the word addiction is not really a valid scientific term. Where we've got the DSM-5 and the ICD-11, which are both diagnostic manuals, the one diagnostic and statistical, they do not use the word addiction, but they rather use such problems, they describe such problems as addictive behaviors or addictive behavior disorders. So the inclusion of addictive disorders in these manuals confirms that addiction is a diagnosable mental health condition that requires appropriate intervention and treatment. It's not just this man-made construct that everyone is throwing around, and it is just becoming more normalized in culture. And it's also not a matter of moral failure or just of poor choices. There's more involved in addictive behaviors. What we also need to understand is that addictive behaviors relate to substances as well as processes. So we're all quite familiar with substance use disorders relating to alcohol, drugs, over-the-counter medications. Those are quite well-known addictive behaviors. But what we are not as aware of is that gambling, the gambling disorder, and now gaming disorder have also been included in the diagnostic and statistical manuals. What we also have is that compulsive sexual behavior disorders have been added to the DSM-5, but under the section for impulse control disorders. But it is under active scientific discussion as to whether to include it into the addictive behavior disorder section or whether to include certain aspects of compulsive sexual behavior into the addictive disorder section, behavior disorder section. What we do see is that whether we are talking about substance use disorders or process addictions, there are the same damage occurs. So we see the same signs and symptoms in substance use disorders as well as addictive behavior disorders. We see the same biological effects, the same neurological impacts, so the same effects on the brain, excuse me, and we see the same unmanageability where life just starts to unravel and we engage in things that are just don't make sense always. So across the board, whether it's substance use disorders or whether it's a addictive behavior disorder, we see the same damage. What we also see, which we haven't got here, is if we look at the impact on the brain, we see there's similar impact on the brain, with some addictive behavior disorders having a more severe impact on the brain, especially in terms of the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of regulation of emotions and rational thought and planning. And so we can understand that whether someone is caught in a substance use disorder or an addictive behavior disorder, there are going to be implications for their own character, their own outworking, as well as there's an effect on the people that are immediately around them. So as I've mentioned, the DSM-5 uses Subs has got a section for substance use disorder and gambling disorder. The ICD-11 has included substance dependence, gambling disorder, and the most recent inclusion was gaming disorder. We're dealing with a couple of people who are battling with this disorder. Even gambling disorder, we've heard stories of people losing their whole salary, their whole monthly salary in one day through gambling. We deal with people who are, the husband is just gaming continually. So the children who are 6 and 8 are gaming continually. The grandparents of the parents of the husband, when the children go there, everyone's gaming. And so there's no interaction happening with the family, and a wife who's battling. How do we deal with this? How do we bring normality? How do we help children not to become addicted and isolate from society as well? So if we look at South Africa, 1 in every 6 South Africans is battling either depression or anxiety or an addictive use disorder. It's very common in South Africa. If we look at addictive disorders in South Africa, the rate of substance abuse in South Africa is twice the global norm. So when we talk about substance use abuse in South Africa, there are 2 schools of thoughts. There's a school of thought that alcohol is pretty much twice, the use of alcohol in South Africa is pretty much twice the global norm. So although we've got a lot of people not using or taking alcohol in South Africa, those that are using alcohol are drinking so much that it pushes us up to using twice the global norm. But cannabis, methamphetamine, cocaine and heroin also falls into that, and we also use pretty much twice the global norm in South Africa. What is concerning is not just the use of that, which has its own repercussions, but domestic abuse cases in South Africa are linked to alcohol abuse. 70% of domestic abuse cases in South Africa. So this goes beyond just actually we need to stop drinking as much as we're drinking. It's having a negative effect on society, and there's a systemic problem that we are dealing with. So if we look at gambling in South Africa, from in the 2023-24 financial year, there was a 40.2% increase in gambling. And the last year's financial year, which ended this year, in South Africa, 1.5 trillion rands was spent on gambling activities. I'm just going to pause there. Charlene did ask me to mention that if you've got any questions, you're welcome to, we'll give 5 minutes at the end and you're welcome to ask questions there, and we'll answer what we are able to answer in that time. What they are saying, and I'm sure you've seen this, is that the aggression of the gambling organizations to getting people to gamble is becoming more and more evident. Where we used to say pornography, you can't go anywhere without seeing pornography, and that's still true, or some form of pornography. We're now seeing that marketed very actively, very proactively, very aggressively, whether I'm playing a little game on my computer or my phone, or whether I'm driving down the highway. It's been marketed very actively, and in a country where there is, and I think many countries have this, but there is such a desperate need to have more money, it is actually robbing our nation. What is also concerning is that the South African average daily internet usage was the highest globally in 2024-25. We averaged 9 hours, 37 minutes online on internet daily in South Africa, where the global average is about between 6 and 7 hours. Ours is 9 hours, 37. The only country that came close to us was Brazil. They were also above 9 hours. I think it's about 9 hours, 16, which is very concerning if we think about the more time we spend online, and we'll see this just now, the more pornography is being watched, and we'll come to that just now. But at the moment, what we do know, and this is not a South African statistic, it is from America, that men between the ages of 18 and 30 years are engaging regularly with pornography. And just to mention that that in itself can be just seen as a moral issue, but it's more than a moral issue. The effect that it has on the brain, the effect that it has on how we see people of the opposite gender, how we see ourselves, how we act out, how our children are acting out is becoming very, very concerning. We're seeing an increase in sibling on sibling sexual abuse. We're seeing systemically, we have got a problem in this area because it's creating a sexual narrative that is not healthy. So if you can think, for example, you've got someone sitting at work and they're watching pornography, they're watching, for example, a man coercing a woman into a situation that she's not wanting or whatever, and then he sees a woman walking past, very difficult to switch to see value in that woman apart from objectifying her. But we won't go down that road too heavily right now. Just to mention that one of the local businesses in the greater Durban area, there was a man that was being tracked who was watching pornography on his computer. He ended up watching pornography at work. And eventually, as happens with many people who are watching pornography, there's a deterioration or a degradation in what is being watched. It's like once it becomes an addiction, it kind of just spirals down. And he ended up watching child pornography, child sexual abuse material at work. And the police actually came into his work because he'd been tracked and now he'd gone over into child sexual abuse material, which is obviously illegal in South Africa. The police had come and they'd arrested him, but they'd also arrested his manager because they felt that the company, and I'm not too sure how it outworked, I was just privy to that part of the information, but the company had to look at what are they doing to protect their employers from not going onto child sexual abuse material or illegal material. There's a limit to what a company can do, but there are things that a company can do as well. So if we look here in South Africa, there is quite a lot of controversy about the number of people that are dependent on alcohol or dependent on substances in the South African workforce. The one statistic that I did manage to verify was that 43% of our South African workforce are estimated to use alcohol excessively, heavily, or harmfully, if that's a word. But out of that also, we've got about 16% of the workforce that are dependent on alcohol. So there is an addiction to alcohol use. There are various statistics that range from 5% to 35% of the South African workforce, but these I was able to verify. Also, in terms of drug use disorders in the South African workforce, there was also research done, and this was by a guy called Smook and a few others as well, a few of his colleagues. They found that approximately 7 to 20% of the South African workforce battles with drug use disorders. So even if we take that as 7% or somewhere between 7 and 20%, we have got a problem in South Africa. And we've got a problem that as employers, I do feel it is a responsibility and it is our responsibility to address. What we do know is that generally, globally, 1 in 5 mobile searches is for pornography. So if you think that in South Africa, for example, we're spending let's say 9.5 hours on the internet, and 1 out of 5 mobile searches, internet searches, are for pornography. We can only imagine how much time is being spent on pornography in South Africa at the moment. I heard one story where it was a government department, and one guy over the course of 2 years had spent on average 4 hours per day on the internet on watching pornography, and he'd spent, so literally over 2 or 4 years, I can't remember what it is, he spent half his time working and half his time on the internet watching pornography. That is a huge cost to any company just in terms of time. So the impact in the workplace is okay. And then we've got adults who use globally, adults who admit to using pornography while it's at work. This was 60%, and this was actually quite a few years ago. It's not a current statistic. And the same with the following statistic is that 70% of porn-related internet traffic in America happens between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. I don't think we that much different in South Africa, although our work hours often start earlier. Can only think that these numbers have increased, and these percentages have increased. So what is the concern for us in the workplace, for you in the workplace? The impact is that someone who is either addicted to substances or either addicted to behaviors, certain behaviors, will have compromised decision-making ability. There will be decreased productivity. There will be an increase in errors and accidents, in injuries and in incidents. We saw that with one of the companies that we work with. There will be an increase in tardiness and absenteeism. There's unethical behavior, criminal activities that often roll out from that, as there's bribery and there's fraud, and all sorts of things start to escalate. They fracture team relationships, and there can be reputational damage, which is a huge concern. So how do we recognize if someone has got addictive behavior or not? So what are the signs and symptoms? What are the diagnostic criteria? So one of them is obsession, where someone who is engaging in some sort of addictive behavior or substance use disorder, they will be so preoccupied with thinking about this. So you might find that they will be talking and just something inappropriate comes out of their mouth, because that's where their mind of. There will be a compulsion that I have to use this. I'm not going to cope if I don't use it. And I know it's inappropriate, but I still need to do it. And so there's this absolute compulsion to engage with this addictive behavior or use addictive substances. There's a loss of control. So that they might start with having a choice, okay, I choose to use, but it comes to a point where once I start, I just can't stop. I can't manage this. And that leads us to unmanageability. So I can see, for example, that this is causing hurt to my family. This is causing hurt to my colleagues at work, but I just am unable to stop, and my life starts to spiral and get out of control. So what you are looking for as in management, in PR or HR, departments, is you're looking for, once you're starting to see a decreased performance or productivity, increased tardiness or abstinence, people taking excessive breaks during working hours, an increase in financial problems. So someone's coming to you on a regular basis, asking for an upfront loan, irrational behavior, mood swings is a huge indicator. You'll find that mood swings can be from the top to the bottom very, very quickly. Constant issues with colleagues and supervisors, dishonesty, secrecy, physical deterioration. So you can have physical symptoms such as shakiness, drowsiness, slurred speech, tiredness. So addiction or addictive behaviors, substance use disorders are a sign of more pervasive issues. So we can try and deal with the addiction and just deal with it. But unless we're dealing with the underlying issues, like as in denial and trauma and dual diagnosis, and all of those issues, we are not going to be able to stop the cycle of addiction. We are not going to be able to stop the acting out. And a lot of programs just focus on stopping the acting out, but not dealing with the underlying contributing factors. And that is where we need to work. So what are the treatment challenges? And I'm sure that you've experienced some of this. There are misconceptions about what addiction looks like. There's a social stigma that is attached to having addiction. There's the availability. I can only go into treatment, say, 21 days a year. And after that, it's dependent on my what I have financially. It's the family support. It brings shame to the family. So there's no support, perhaps. Treatment duration at the moment, what is supported by the medical aids is wholly insufficient. And we'll see if we've got time, we'll see why just now. Charlene, just please stop me when, or give me a heads up when I need to start slowing down or finishing.
Kiri, you do have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you so much. All right. So there's debatable efficacy about certain treatments, and there's very limited continuum of care. So someone goes into treatment, and what happens when they come out? Where do they go to? Because as we'll see, and I'm going to skip a few slides now, so we can just see where sort of what the treatment looks like. And then the rest you'll be able to access on through HR Talk as well. So treatment takes time. It starts with brokenness. Often it starts with brokenness. Something's been unveiled, and that can be the motivating factor to someone wanting to change, wanting to start a journey of recovery. That might be actually you're going to need to change, or otherwise we're going to have to end your contract or something like that. A person needs to come to a place of surrender to say, okay, I accept I've got a problem. I need to do what I need to do to change. There needs to be abstinence in the journey. It's no point in no abstinence. There needs to be absolute abstinence. And ideally, someone needs to walk through a program. The reality is that recovery takes time. Radical change takes time. So if we look through the stages of change, we need to move someone from pre-contemplation, where they're unwilling, to contemplation, where they're ambivalent. Do I have a problem? Don't I have a problem? To determination, I'm going to make this work. I need to make a change. I'm going to make it work. And we need to catch people at that time. Then there's action, where recovery is implemented. And once that is stable, then there's maintenance and there's sustaining. So we are moving people from sort of what we call maladaptive mechanisms that underpin addiction to adaptive, healthy mechanisms like community, like mental health care, like coping skills, self-worth, etc., into recovery. So if we look at the recovery journey, it takes abstinence plus radical change. So someone coming out of rehab, who's been in rehab for 8 days or 28 days, they are still in the stabilization phase. They're still in early recovery. They are not yet through to the maintenance phase where they're strong and they can stand. So we need to understand that recovery takes abstinence plus a radical change. It's an ongoing process. It's not just an event. So it needs to take a plan, a well thought out plan, a robust recovery journey, and it requires ongoing support and realistic expectations. If I expect someone coming out of rehab to be completely fixed in 21 or 28 days, that is not a realistic expectation. And I think, Charlene, I know we haven't got to the corporate side of things, but I'm going to end it there because I know that our time is limited. And I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'm going to stop sharing.
Would it be possible to follow up how to deal with addiction in the workplace? Okay, so what I can just try and do, I can just summarize it into because it is not necessarily a lengthy process, but it is a process that needs to be quite detailed. So I'll give you a quick scenario and how you would deal with it. So in most environments, when workplace environments, addiction. So I'll use alcohol for example. If you are caught to be intoxicated while in the workplace, usually most employers would address this as misconduct. So they would have a disciplinary inquiry of which there would be, this person has done something wrong, so we need to discipline them. But if we look at it in terms of the Labor Reactions Act, is we have to consider it if it is addiction. So if it's an addiction, we can't approach it as misconduct, because misconduct, it is clearly that the person did this on purpose or willingly chose not to do this. So if the person does have a is dependent obviously in that substance, you can't treat it as misconduct, so you can't discipline, so you'd approach it as incapacity. So that's just basically a quick summary to how you tell the difference. So the difference is if I, Sabelo, have a drinking problem and I'm caught at work to be, I'm found to be intoxicated, then the approach wouldn't be misconduct. I should not be disciplined for being drunk if I am dependent. However, if it was just a rough weekend and I decided to go partying with my friends and perhaps drink too much, maybe till the early hours of the morning, and then I come to work, I'm not dependent on the drug, but I am tested positive, then my employer can discipline based on the fact that it's not the fact that I'm dependent on it. However, um, I'm dependent on the drug. Okay. Hey, good morning. Very informative, relevant. Wish we had more time okay, thank you very much for that. How do you go into reintegrating someone into workplace who has been dismissed based on dependency and is within 28 days of rehab? How do we introduce or complete reintegration? I'm not too sure with this one. I'm not sure if Carrie would perhaps be at a better position to answer that. In terms of if someone now is coming back into the workplace, maybe they've been off to rehab, how do we comfortably get them back into the work environment, and perhaps things we should be cautioned of? Maybe at that time, I'm interpreting the question.
Sabelo, do you want me to just pick up from my side and then you can just add anything?
Oh, sure. Yes, please.
Okay, so what we do advocate, and I think I might have it here. There we go. We do advocate for secondary care. We need to understand that there needs to be care beyond rehabilitation, wherever possible. So the organization could have something internally, or they could promote something externally. It would be really great for organizations to make provision for recovery groups if they're finding it. We have been approached by a couple of organizations to train facilitators in the organization to run recovery groups and or aftercare programs. I think whoever is supervising the situation to ask for what we call a life recovery plan, but many centers call a relapse prevention plan. So we say it's a life recovery plan because it's what are we moving towards rather than what are we trying to stay away from. We encourage facilitating accountability measures and support structures. So, for example, if someone has been caught, whatever, make sure that if it's substance use, that there's random testing. If it's online abuse, make sure that there is software, reporting software online. Not every bit of software is foolproof, but as a supervisor, we need to do whatever we can to help within what we can do. And so ensure that there's support structures, and involve where possible. We just find that if we don't involve family members, we're not dealing with the problem holistically. So somehow involve family members, and then cultivate a corporate culture of recovery. So it's been quite a thing in one of the organizations to just break down the stigma that's attached to addictive behaviors, substance use disorders. And it takes intentionality. They've got their media team to just build this intentionality about creating a culture of wellness. And part of that is the recovery journey. Sabelo, I don't know if you've got anything to add there.
So I think just from the work and perspective, if you're coming back to work, I think it is also dependent on the environment of the workplace. So if perhaps someone works in a factory and we've learned that maybe they have a dependent problem, maybe they're dependent too much of alcohol, we send them away to rehab. If we're reintegrating them and they have to come back, obviously we have to be cautioned. Things like you'd find that perhaps on the terms and conditions of the person coming back as maybe there will be random drug test, the person will be subjected to the random drug test to also ensure that, because that person, should they, I know it sounds awful, this person just got back in rehab, but the employer still has the responsibility to ensure that everybody within the work environment is safe. So we'd have perhaps as the terms and conditions that should the person who would be subjected to random drug tests, just to ensure that in terms of the safety perspective for themselves and everybody else, during this period when someone is getting back, it is confirmed correctly that this person is not there are barriers in line to ensure that perhaps they do not trip and fall. I see we have somebody who has their hand up.
Oh, okay, thank
Hi.
you. All right. I would like to get some assistance rather. How do I deal with the matter of an employee who is always complaining of financial problems, in a way that he is not able to come to work due to the fact that he doesn't have transport money. When you try to dig, what is it that maybe caused this? He would say, no, I cannot afford anything. And then he would say, she would rather go to his chronics. He would tell you about his chronics. And when you're saying, okay, if it's about the chronics, then give us maybe from your doctor who can sort of give the reason why you cannot come to work, but we will find out where the doctors cannot do it, meaning that it is not about his chronic problems. So it ends up for you to think it's about finances. And I would love to know if he is an addict, whether gambling or alcohol, or I mean substance abuse, So I don't know how to get to that, because I've been trying to get to the gist of the reason behind this thing. And he ended up thinking of resigning. So I just need an assistance here, because I'm worried about this guy. But seemingly for me, I can't do anything because he's not open. He cannot tell what is it that is the problem, because for me, his reasons are not the underlying problem, but I've tried and tried, So what else could I do, guys?
Yeah. So I can firstly try and just explain it from the HR's perspective if you have something like that, and then I'm just going to hand it over to Carrie in terms of diagnosing someone. Okay. So if we have someone, so I think the problem if we look at it from an HR perspective is the fact that we have employees who just mess around. They'll complain about everything else. My money is not enough. I'm not being paid enough. They will complain about everything else. Or you'd find that someone has a genuine problem. And then in this instance, Kerry also mentioned that in South Africa, we're seeing a very high rise in terms of people who are addicted to gambling. So in this instance, if you're dealing with an employee, unfortunately, the signs might be all there, but if the employee does not say, raise my hand, I, Sabelo, believe that I have a problem, please help me, this is my problem. Then you can't take the responsibility as an employer to try and figure that out and help me, because you're going to take me to rehab only to find that I'm going to tell you that I do not have a problem. So the best of approach is, if this person is giving you reasons that perhaps you could see, perhaps maybe there could be a potential this person is addicted to gambling, or perhaps maybe it's substance abuse. If they do not say that I have a problem, I would deal with it in terms of misconduct. Okay, if you're supposed to come back to work on Monday and you did not come back to work and you did not report, if you come back on Tuesday and then I'll ask you the reason, and if your reason is not valid enough, I'm going to discipline you, because you are not saying to me that you have a problem. And again, if you're going to say that you have a problem, I just can't take it from face value. If you say you have an addiction problem, I need to take you to places like Project X, where an assessment is going to be made, and they need to determine it clearly that you do have a problem. So we can't just take it from face value, and as employer, you're not responsible to figure out what's wrong with them. If they're not showing up, you can deal with this misconduct. However, if they're saying that I have a problem, then you can look at it in terms of an incapacity. I'm not sure if Carrie, you have anything to add on that.
Sabelo, I would 100% agree with you. You can never force someone to disclose what is really going on. You have a very strong suspicion. The signs are all there, but apart from them disclosing and being willing to disclose, your hands are pretty much tied, and you do need to follow your policies just in terms of misconduct.
Yeah, no, I'm asking because I've seen that because one time he said to me, because of my situation, I would rather resign. So tell me, what is the process? And I said, no, unfortunately, I'm doing employee wellness. Can you go to HR practitioners so that they can give you everything that is to do with the resignation. But I, as a person, I would never advise anyone to say, leave the job. I would rather tell them, because I wanted him, I was trying to dig maybe 1 minute would be honest to say, because I know there is underlying, but for me as wellness, I cannot do anything because I can't say, like, disclose, but I could see the signs. But now, I'm saying, I'm asking this question out of guilt. I'm feeling very bad when I'm seeing this resignation.
Yeah, what you need to understand is that someone involved in addiction, they're very master manipulators. So you will feel manipulated and you will feel like you are in the wrong, but they've been given a choice. So you need to understand that even the saying, well, then I'm going to resign, it can be a form of manipulation. So so just also be aware of that. There will be,
but I still get the resignation. That's why. So when while I'm here, I was like, oh, let me ask, because maybe I want to take out the guilt, because I feel bad as if I've failed him. I've failed his family, But the problem is I was tied up because he couldn't tell what is it that he is suffering from, so that I can assist, Okay. Thank you very much.
Guys, thank you very much for that question. So that in the interest of time, we will be ending this training. If anyone has any questions, perhaps they could be just about addiction, you can reach out to Charlene. She'll put you in charge with Carrie, or you can, if you have any related HR questions, also please reach out to Charlene. She'll assist you and redirect you to me, and then I'll be able to assist. There is a course in line with this quick training that we had today. Charlene will be sharing the details in terms of the course. It basically will have questions in terms of what we dealt with today, and if after completion, there is a certificate that you will receive upon completion. There is a prize. I think it is 150 years. So please just check that out. But thank you very much, everyone, for availing yourself today, and thank you very much, Kelly, for a very detailed and a very clear presentation. Some of the things that we don't even notice up until I think about it, that if you think about, there's numbers of billboards of places that are advertising gambling every corner, up until you mentioned that, I honestly start realizing. So it was quite informative, and it helps one look a bit into themselves, into maybe I might not have a problem, but amongst ourselves we might have people dealing with it. So thank you very much for that.
No, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity as well. Thank you.